have an idea on where this one is going, but I did want to touch on it, and I may do a separate video on the strike in and of itself. If you guys, hope you guys doing okay today. If you guys enjoy this content, if you find yourself coming here often, please consider supporting the content. They demonetize a lot of these videos, but that's it. So this is taking place right now. This is a teacher strike. This is in Los Angeles, one of the richest, richest country on the planet, one of the richest states. And the teachers don't have the basic necessities in order to do their job adequately and safely for the kids. Certainly, these people don't want to be out here screaming and acting out with these signs and whatnot. It's not something necessarily that people will want to do on a whim. All things being equal, it's cold, it's wet. They're probably feeling to some degree demoralized, but also invigorated by the experience, even though they would probably wish that this experience wouldn't take place. Again, richest country on the planet and one of the richest states, and the governments, this aspect of the government, don't have the adequate resources in order to do what it needs to do in order to keep operations running smoothly. This is not a situation where the government has been, what they want is their demand, smaller class sizes and higher salaries. Considering that these people are teaching our young people, I don't have any kids, but this is, for me, the next generation, considering that this, they're holding these little minds in their hands. Yeah, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but you get my point. Can we make sure that they are adequately attended to? Again, you would prefer for kids to grow up in a decent, you can say caring, supportive environment. Not necessarily environments with 40, 50 people in a class. So this is a legal strike, though. Whatever you want to think of this, this is a legal strike. And like I said, these people are out here screaming, being indignant. But one thing that you'll also get is they're strong. They're strong. 30,000 strong went out there on that picket line when they weren't getting what they needed to get to feel adequately like a person. Strength is a part of this process, even though it's not necessarily a strength that anybody wants to flex. This is legal. This teacher strikes in West Virginia are illegal but effective. In Washington, those type of strikes are illegal. Whereas in California, they can do that. In Washington, they can't. Same thing in West Virginia. If you remember the West Virginia teacher strikes last year, again, they went on a picket line. West Virginia has, if I'm not mistaken, like the 49th percentile, meaning from the standpoint of poverty for teachers, or in regards to pay. But it was illegal for them to go out on that picket line, and they did it anyway. And even though their gains weren't great, their gains were rather modest in the grand scheme of things, they did it. They had the balls to do it. They went out there and did it anyway, because it was better to do that as opposed to being demoralized in the capacity to which they were operating. There is a strength associated with making a demand and standing by the demand that's being made. And in these two examples, the one from West Virginia and Washington State.
United States Coast Guard.
That is annoying that it automatically comes on. West Virginia and Washington State, both of which were illegal, both of which made gains. The point that I'm making is, rather overt. When we're talking about the TSA workers or the workers of the government, we're in day 27 of the shutdown. When we're talking about these people who are working, nearly 1 million, who aren't getting a paycheck but are still going into work every day, many of which, some have started to essentially call out sick, but the majority still get up and go to work every day. They've started food banks. I've watched grown men break down and start crying when they talk about not being able to support their kids or not being able to support their family, because most people live paycheck to paycheck. And yet they still go into work. Partly the reason they go into work is because they have to, at least from the standpoint of the law. It is illegal for these guys, these federal workers, to go on strike. And yet, to some degree, they're being induced to continue to work. You can imagine this is a demoralizing situation. Take a look at this. This is Democracy Now! And this person on Democracy Now! Had the exact same idea that I articulated. So I'm going to hit this idea again with a somewhat specificity with the TSA on this one. Let's take a look at some of the conditions that these guys are experiencing.
The Transportation Security Administration has become a flashpoint for growing outrage over the mistreatment of federal workers due to the shutdown. In Florida, the Tampa airport has set up a food bank for unpaid TSA workers. In Phoenix, Arizona, a food bank served nearly 300 TSA employees from a mobile pantry. TSA workers rallied in airports in Sacramento, California, and Baltimore, Maryland Wednesday, warning that the shutdown is threatening aviation security. Hundreds more around the country have been calling in sick, with the agency reporting more than 6% unscheduled absences in what some are calling a blue flu protest. On Wednesday, TSA employees protested outside Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport and the Los Angeles International Airport. This is TSA union leader Bobby Orosco speaking in Los Angeles, where TSA agents signed up for food cards after rallying.
So as you see behind me, a lot of the folks are getting food, trying to get whatever they can get in order to survive. I mean, right now it's just high anxiety. Not only did we not get our last paycheck, but it seems very likely that we may not get our next paycheck.
Fact of the matter is, Donald Trump has been extraordinarily cavalier with when or whether you get paid at all. I mean, keep in mind, this is the same guy that didn't want to give a modest, like 2% increase, saying that we can't afford it, while simultaneously giving millionaires and billionaires massive tax cuts. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about the millions of people who are working in this sense. Also, look at the difference between West Virginia, Washington, and California, where there's a certain strength about making a demand and going with that, as opposed to this of we're not getting our paychecks and everything else. They don't care about you, dude. This has nothing to do with you at this point. This becomes somewhat of a political sticking point. Your pain that you and many of the other people with you, that million, are experiencing, you are for the most part experiencing that pain alone because you guys are continuing to go in and do that job. Over and over again, you're doing a job that you're not getting paid for. I mean, come on. I understand that the Taft-Hartley Act makes it illegal. It's illegal for the other people to go out and protest also, but they did it anyway. There's a certain indignity about being treated this way. And fact of the matter is, whether it's legal or not, maybe don't call it a strike. Maybe call it a mass sick day that everybody just so happens to take on one particular day that cripples airlines' ability to function. Call it whatever you want to call it. All I'm saying is, it is more dignified to stand up and walk out, as opposed to being bled away like this. What happens if this goes for months, 2 months, 3 months? What do you do? How long can you go without a paycheck? They're opening up food banks right now, and with those food banks, I mean, people, like 300. Think of the number of people that is going without food or in food insecurity to use a food bank to such a degree. How long can you go without a paycheck? That's a fascinating question. I mean, the majority of Americans don't have $500 in the bank. So this idea of how long you can go without a paycheck, in many cases, not far. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be bled off where you're going to have to go find a job anyway? Or do you stand and say, I'm not taking this? And that the pain that's visited upon you get also visited on everybody else. It shouldn't be your suffering alone. The government is shut down. It should look like the government is shut down. And for as long as you go into work, you allow this kind of charade to keep going. And the people in Washington to essentially continue to go with this political circus. I mean, for fuck's sake. You are the engine of this nation. Do you realize that? Like, nothing takes place without labor going through it, meaning there's no wealth, there's no anything. The wealth that gets appropriated from you and pushed to the top. The greatest aggravation to me is that the 99% accepts this, that it accepts all of this wealth being expropriated to the top, to a top 1%, as opposed to a society that is organized in a way where that wealth is used for the betterment of that society. There's a difference in those things. In this particular situation, you have a billionaire president who's essentially rich his entire life, never knows what it means to go without taking policy positions. Not because there's a real crisis, not because there's really anything that needs to take place, but purely for political gamesmanship. And you may say that the Democratic Party is feeding into this, but let's be honest, between the two, it's Donald Trump who said he wants to build a wall. And in this case, is the blame, or the person who's most responsible for nearly 800,000 people for the last 2 weeks and going into an uncertain future won't get paychecks. What do? Lay there and bleed all day, or do you do something about it? And that something about it, yes, somewhat dramatic, yes, somewhat of a big show, and yes, having 500,000 people call out sick cripples the country, but your government is in a shutdown. The bakers, the cooks, the people who, make your coffee, the people who write your computer programs, all of these things, these are functions of labor to some degree. It's, in the same way where at some point we thought we need kings and queens, at this point we have this idea that people need capitalists, and the point of view of the society gets warped to look out for the top 1% as opposed to everybody else. If you stop working, their fortunes go away. And not just their fortunes go away, the society stops. As you go, so goes society. At some point, labor is going to recognize that it is the thing that makes society run, not the top 1%. We need to stop looking at the world through their eyes. Either way, in this particular case, stepping out, again, even if you don't call it a strike, call it a sick day, a mass sick day. Hey, everybody comes down with being sick and tired. Well, what are you sick and tired of? I don't know. I'm just sick and tired. I can't go into work today. I have the chills. I'm shaking. The woman who's Barbara Etherinick, I'm pronouncing her name wrong, has come to the same conclusion. Standing there and allowing yourself to be bled off place by place by place, meaning one person after the next, having to go somewhere else to look for another job. It is more potent. It is more dramatic to stand in your power and saying, we are not going to accept this particular situation. So, I'll leave this here. I'm not going to keep this one long. I may have another one, and I have a 420 that I really want to do. So, we'll see. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.